Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
So Chelsea is joining from home. I am out at the winery. That means that Chelsea got to take her tasting kit home with her. So we're going to be doing this in a couple different ways, which I'm guessing is probably going to mirror the way that you all are doing this at home, because we do have the tasting kits and we did sell out of those. So there are, I don't know, 100 of those roughly around the country, and we're excited to have you open them. And then we always have lots of people join who just choose to open a bottle from the shipment or just something they have in the cellar. There's really no wrong way to do this. So however you are joining and however you are opening a bottle or a glass or a box of Tablas Creek, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Chelsea, would you introduce yourself a little bit for people who maybe don't know you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my name is Chelsea Franchi, and I've been here working at Tablas Creek since 2007. I started well, not even in the tasting room. I started as a greeter outside of the tasting room. And when I graduated from Cal Poly, I studied agricultural business and wine and viticulture. And when I graduated, Tablas Creek was kind enough to essentially create a position for me in the cellar. And I've been here ever since. So, been working with Neil since 2008. And I don't know, I truly feel like every year it just gets better and better. And I love this company more and more. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I saw, Chris, Chelsea has a new title. Those of you who are close observers will have noticed that. We promoted her to director of winemaking in recognition of just the awesome work that she has been doing. So that happened late last year. Neil Collins, who has been our director of winemaking for ever since we created that position like 15 years ago, and our winemaker for a decade before that, was promoted to director of production, so he can focus on some of the longer term, more vineyard-based projects that he's been working on, kind of a recognition of a shift that's been happening over recent years. So I was texting with him. He's on the road right now. I was texting with him earlier today. He said there was a chance he would pop in for a cameo. So I'm hoping that he does. But if not, we hope that you are in good hands with us. So Chelsea, do you want to explain the Master of the World kits a little bit, since you have one to demonstrate?
I would love to. These are perhaps just the cutest little kits. I also love a kit. Everything you need just conveniently in one wonderful package. So I've taken my wines out of these, but you can see essentially that it's a library of wines. So this is what they look like when they fit in here. And they're just, great representation. So you can taste just a little splash. You can share it with probably, I would say 2 people, but you can easily share with more than 2 people even.
My mom and my mother-in-law at one point tried to share one of these kits and didn't realize until they were most of the way through it that it's a bottle and a half of wine if you finish all 6 of the little bottles, because they're quarter bottles each. So just be aware, those of you who are planning to open all 6 of these, that you probably don't want to finish all 6 of these, even if there's 2 of you there.
Yeah, but this is such a cool way to experience the shipment. For people that weren't able to come to the pickup party that we had this last weekend, where we were able to open up all the wines, but we know that Paso Robles is kind of a haul for some of you. So this is a great opportunity for us to do this with you.
Cool. And I love seeing all the comments and things that are coming through. These are so much fun when they are interactive. So please, as we're going, toss in whatever comments, thoughts you have, questions you have that you'd like us to answer. Ian Consoli, our director of marketing, is at the switchboard. So he is going to be bringing comments up on screen and questions up on screen throughout the conversation. He's also, if he has a library of pictures, I warned him kind of the outline of what we're going to be talking about. So there will be illustrations for hopefully some of the things that we are going to show you and talk to you about. Meanwhile, yeah, awesome. So I second all of these nice comments that people are making about you, Chelsea. Okay, so our goal is to have this be pretty tight. We would like to be done in about an hour and a half. So if you're trying to plan the rest of your evening, um, set the timer for what, 80 minutes from now, and let's go. And before we wait any longer, let's have you pour your first wine. So if you are following along with the kit, we're going to start with the Dianthus. That's the Dianthus Rosé. If you just have a glass of whatever Tubeless Creek you're choosing, then make sure you have some in your glass, and let's start. Okay, Chelsea. So the Dianthus, we do two rosés. The Dianthus is our estate rosé. It's based on Mourvedre. I'm guessing that people maybe are more familiar with our Patalenda Tubeless rosé, which we make more of and gets into a little bit broader distribution. But can you talk about how we make the Dianthus and how you think of the differentiation between the two rosés that we make?
I'd love to. I know you said keep it to 80 minutes, and I could just talk 80 minutes about the rosés, but I will try to be more abbreviated. But this is definitely a passion project. So with the Patalon Rosé, that fruit is 80 to 90% direct press, meaning we pick the fruit specifically for the rosé, and it's put directly into the press, and then that juice is just going to rosé. It's not going to anything else. So we are really picking our lots based on numbers that we want just for the rosé. So lower sugars, higher acids. In contrast, the Dianthus is essentially made from basically our finest lots that we have out on our estate. So we're looking at reds. You can kind of see the general breakdown of this. It's based on Mourvedre, followed by Grenache, and then, Counoise is after that. And in the last few years, we have been able to add Senso, which is just like one of the great joys of my life. I'm so excited to have more Senso. But this is kind of, minus the Syrah, this is essentially kind of a snapshot of the breakdown of our Esprit. So what we're looking at is basically these great lots of red wines that we have out in our vineyard. When they come into the cellar, we basically, sort them through, destem them, put them into tank. And then anywhere from 1 to 3 days later, we're going to bleed the juice off, which is a process that we call saigner, which in French means to bleed. So we basically decide, depending on the lot, we'll take anywhere from about 15 to 20% of that juice. So we bleed it off of the bottom of the tank and then put it into a separate tank to ferment. Always stainless steel. We ferment it nice and cold, so we're maintaining that freshness, keeping that vibrancy. And this is a really neat project because it's really the first snapshot we get to see of a vintage. You can see how quickly things are coloring up. It's really your first introduction to the aromatic structure that a lot of these wines are going to be developing as the harvest progresses. And then another thing too is with most of our wines, with all of our estate wines, we harvest everything separately, we ferment everything separately, and then we age everything separately. So then when it comes time to blending, which we're, starting to plan and get our things together for, red and white blending for 2025 in a couple weeks here, all of those lots that we picked separately during harvest, we now have basically like an entire spice arsenal, if you will. So we can really pick and choose exactly where everything is going to go and how it's going to be placed, eventually in a blend. Where Dianthus is this great rolling fermentation that we maintain the entirety of harvest. So, we start with those early Grenache lots coming into the cellar, and you have these high sugar levels. And then as they start to ferment, that sugar starts to dip, and then we'll add some more Grenache. And it's just this really cool kind of rolling fermentation that lasts all through harvest. And so I do think it adds a little bit of depth and complexity. So for a wine that has an early release like the rosés, that nuance is already built into the wine because we built it up all harvest. But this is something that, because it's coming from more powerful red lots, it stays on the skins for, that 1 to 3 days. It does have much more structure. It does have more intensity than the Patalon Rosé. So this is definitely a rosé that I would recommend people traditionally enjoy with food, where the Patalon Rosé, that's a great aperitif. You can enjoy it on a sunny afternoon. But this one I think is one of the most versatile wines that we make at Tablas. So this is something that I think has earned a meal to pair with it.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite wines to do pairings with at wine dinners. I still remember a pairing that I did at with a dinner. No, I didn't do it. Whatever. Got to experience it at Thomas Hill Organics in the early days of Thomas Hill Organics when Julie was the chef there still, and she paired the dianthus with a Cajun spice rubbed quail with a salted watermelon feta salad, and it was the experience of like the wine being poured and everyone is tasting the wine and talking. The food comes down, and having people taste the food and then the wine and then the food and then the wine, and like the whole courtyard at Thomas Hill went silent as people were like, wow, wow, wow. So I think people sometimes think of rosés as these like the wines to have before you have the serious wines, and this is not a rosé that you need to necessarily consign to that. Um,
Agreed. Yeah, I love. I mean, this is a great summer wine, obviously. I think the Cajun spice absolutely nailed it. Anything with some heat to it, this is a great foil for. And it goes well with a lot of these fresh spring produce dishes that we're preparing now that do have higher acidity. Maybe a squeeze of lemon or some lime. Those tend to be a little more difficult to pair with because you need a high acid wine. You need a wine with higher acid than what's in your dish. And this can absolutely fit the bill. It's got that acidity that'll carry through and cut through a lot of anything that you pair with it. This is a great option.
we made fajitas last night, chicken fajitas, and we made margaritas to pair with them. But if I had gone wine, like this would have been my choice.
This is a great section option. I think you made the right call.
Awesome. The other thing which I think is worth noting is that the Patalan Rosé is from grapes that we are mostly purchasing that are grown at other vineyards, and this is entirely off of our state, which means it is regenerative organic and biodynamic certified. If you look on the back label, you should see that there it is, that ROC Gold. So we'll talk more about that when we get to some of the farming things, but.
That never gets old, seeing that on the bottles.
It feels pretty great.
It
And
does.
that gold and the color of the dianthus together are pretty fun. Cool. So somebody's saying that they're enjoying crab cakes with the dianthus. That sounds pretty good. And I would guess that those crab cakes are probably going to be pretty great with the next wine that we're going to taste also. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the winter that we're currently in. So if you are still enjoying the dianthus, enjoy that. We'll be moving on to the Esprit de Tablas Blanc in just a couple minutes. But I just published a blog, and some of the numbers that I got from the research that I did for it were just mind-blowing. So we have had overall a fairly wet winter. It hasn't felt like it, though, because in between each big rainstorm has been like 3 or 4 weeks of sun and warmth. So we'll get 5 inches of rain and then 3 weeks of sun. 5 inches of rain, 3 weeks of sun. The last real rain we got was in mid-February, and that was also the last time it got really cold. And by the end of February, it had warmed up. We saw bud break the beginning of March, the earliest bud break that we've seen since 2016. And then March was so warm that it would have been the warmest April since we created our weather station back in 1996. It was warmer than the average May over that period. So these numbers are kind of crazy. We have accumulated as much heat on March 31st this year as we did on May 7th last year. So I mean, we are talking about things that we have never seen before. The grapevines are out. We have seen bud break. Yeah, there you go. We're seeing flower clusters. Like this looks like what you would normally see at the end of April or the beginning of May, not the end of March or beginning of April. Because of all of that water and because of all of the warmth, the cover crops are amazing. It is incredibly green and lush out there. the wildflowers, the areas where we haven't knocked them down, the wildflowers are just unbelievable. I promise there are grapevines in there. That is a picture of our vineyard, even if you can't see them.
That's a happy looking vineyard.
It is a really happy looking vineyard. And I feel like it's gotten a little golder. I took that maybe a week ago, 10 days ago, maybe, and it's already starting to turn gold, which is a normal thing. It happens at this time of year, but it is pretty kind of a riot of growth. So I don't know, Chelsea, what have you noticed about this winter that we had? What are your take homes about your experience of it?
It's interesting because you had come into the lab earlier this week to tell us about this blog that you were writing and these findings. And we weren't necessarily surprised by the numbers because we've been living this reality. But it has been an interesting cycle. The storms really started mid-harvest. I mean, this 2025 harvest, we had kind of in multiple parts because we had to take breaks because of rain cycles that were coming through. And that's really kind of how the rest of the rain season lasted, because it was these stops and starts. And it wasn't necessarily just kind of like a drizzly, wet winter. It was just these big storms that rolled in. And it was just really a winter in three parts for us. We had three major storms. And to your point, it's really interesting because it didn't feel like we got a lot of rain because they were kind of truncated. It wasn't just spread out. But it was a good amount of water. And to your point, it was that deep watering that everything received. So, it really, really saturated the soils deep, deep into the root zones. So I think, it felt like a dry winter, and I'm a skier, so it did feel like a dry winter. But I think the way that we received the rains and when we received the rains, I think it's going to be okay. Everything looks really healthy. Everything looks incredibly happy. Aaron and Austin have been doing a wonderful job, with all of the regeneration out in the vineyard. You're showing us the pictures of the wildflowers, and that's not an accident. These are things that they have specifically placed there for micro and macronutrient maximization. So it looks beautiful, but it goes well beyond that. It's doing good work out there. So yeah, I think things are gonna be wonderful as long as we don't get hit by hard frosts. Sarah's point, she just asked a question about frosts. Yes, we are very concerned about frosts. Typically we are worried until about mid-May. That kind of is usually the end of, when we can take a deep breath and we're more or less out of the big frost danger zone. But I woke up this morning and my neighbor's frost fans were going. When I got out to Talbot's Creek, our frost fans were going. Austin said he woke up at 3 a.m. and I think the vineyard was 39 degrees. So he turned them on out of an abundance of caution. But it's a little scary. We're going to white knuckle it for the next couple of weeks for sure. Because everything
it's a longer period than normal because the sprouting was so early. We have just a longer wait until we feel like we're safe. So yeah, we're worried, and the impact of a frost would be worse than normal because of how far out things are. The vines have already expended most of the energy that they'd stored up in the winter. So if we were to get a freeze, it would be a big problem. So anyway, fingers crossed. Anybody who has a line with the weather gods or any pull, please put in a good word for us. Okay, so let's talk about wine number 2. So this is our Esprit de Table Blanc. This is our flagship white Chateauneuf du Pape inspired blend. It's always led by Roussanne. Chelsea, when you think of the Esprit Blanc, or when you think of putting together the Esprit Blanc, you've been in charge of the blending trials that we've done here for the last decade. What for you is an Esprit Blanc kind of lot? What highlights it as being appropriate for this wine?
So when we're blending the Esprit Blanc, and for those of you who aren't as familiar with our blending process, basically what we do is because we have everything separate, all of these lots separate, we go through and taste everything blind. So for instance, we'll know that we're tasting Roussan, but we don't know which pick or which block or which specific lot we're tasting. And we write notes and then we score everything on a 3-point scale. So one is going to be something that's elegant and lush and it has structure and, a decent amount of power. And this is usually a 1 is something that we know we're going to fast track to Esprit Blanc. But this is something that's just full and complete and gorgeous just on its own even. A 2 is usually something that is juicy and has great energy, but it's really lacking that gravity that would push it into a 1 category. It's very friendly, but it just doesn't have that gravity that we're looking for and that hold. And then a 3 is usually something that maybe it's just not finished. It's just something that we need to kind of, dog ear for work later in the cellar. Add some, maybe it is oxidized, maybe it's reduced, maybe it's still sweet. And so we can't really wrap our heads around what it's going to be when it's finished. Or maybe it's something that is just not to the caliber that we're looking for a Topless Creek estate wine. And so we can declassify it into Patelon. For the Esprit lots, basically, we go around the table, everybody shares their scores for everything. And many times people will share their notes. And it's interesting because when you start to hear what people are saying about, again, that elegance, that plushness, that beauty, those are always the wines that we're going to mark for Esprit. So this is something, it does need to have all of those, but it still needs to have that energy. The thing about Esprit Blanc for me is it does have that breadth. It is truly the most elegant wine. This is actually the wine that made me want to work at Topless Creek. So to be able to craft this wine every vintage is a massive honor and not something that I take lightly. But this also needs to have, that florality. It needs to have that acidity. It needs to have all of these things in balance. So it is a full palate experience. You want it to be really broad on the palate when it enters. And I do want it to narrow at the end into this great bracing acidity that just lingers on your palate for a long, long time. So we do want it to be that full experience.
Cool. I think that sort of cabinet of spices, and I totally want to rename my spice cabinet a spice arsenal now, because that would make me smile every time I saw it. But so I think Roussan is amazing for its depth and richness and ageability and power and texture. And in general, we're always blending things into that are brighter, because Roussan is like all of this like core, middle, and base notes. And then the things that we're blending in, all the other white Rhone varieties, the Grenache Blanc, the Picpoul, the Bourbon Claret, Picardon, those are all higher in acid than Roussan is. And our goal is to keep that essential texture and richness and weight, but give it freshness. So I love the way that this came out. And it is a little brighter than I feel like maybe some older vintages were, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that we now have some grape varieties available that we did not have in earlier years of Topless Creek. So this has all 6 of the Chateauneuf white grapes in it. It's got not just Roussan, Grenache Blanc, and Picpoul, but it's got Bourbon Blanc, it's got Picardon, it's got Claret Blanche, and in fact, it has all of the Bourbon Blanc and all of the Claret and all of the Picardon. I actually got all of all 3 of those, didn't it, in 2024? We didn't make a varietal of any of those. So those were not available to us a decade ago. The other thing, we were sort of led in this direction by a couple of recent vintages where our Roussan was pretty scarce. It happened in 2020. It happened again in 2022. And we could not use that much Roussan in this blend. We were using all of our Roussan, and it was still only 35, 40, 45%. And we realized when we were tasting these blends where we had a higher percentage of some of the fresher grapes in the blend, that we actually really loved it. That for this wine, where we want it to be something that people can lay down and age, but we also want it to be something that people can order at a restaurant in a month and it will be glorious, that this is a great fit. finally, in 2024, we were able to differentiate this by having it be a slightly brighter profile because we have a new wine. That's funny. Yes, it was cold when we were blending that year. That's true. We put the Yule log channel on the big display. But in 2024, we were able for the first time to wrap our heads around a new white blend, a white version of our Panoply, which we are calling Panoply Blanc. And this will be released in the fall. That's also why, if you're wondering, if you've been a wine club member for a long time and you're used to getting the Esprit Blanc in the fall, we moved it to a spring release so that we could release the Panoply Blanc in the fall. We felt like the Panoply Blanc would benefit from a little bit longer in bottle before we released it. And so that's going to be a fall release going forwards, and the Esprit Blanc is going to be a spring release.
And it is such a fun wine. I mean, I feel like it's always so exciting when we do make a new wine, but this has been in the works for a long, long time. I mean, your dad, Robert Haas, he was talking about making a white version of the Panoply for years and years. Again, we're always looking to Beaucastel in certain regards, and paying homage to the way that, they structure their wines. And they've had the Via Vin for so long that is just one of the great wines of the world, truly. And this is kind of our effort. I mean, obviously that's Roussanne, but this is, I think,
mostly Roussanne.
Yeah, this is mostly Roussanne, and it does have that depth. It does have that intensity. And this is a very special wine. And white wines are so much fun to drink because, I was talking to you about, I would love to do a white wine blending because we do the blending seminar every year. We always do reds, but the white wines are so much fun to blend because the personalities, they are so diverse and so interesting. And it is a little bit easier to taste them because you don't get bound by tannins after tasting for a long time. So if you're not as used to blending, but the Panoply Blanc is just something that I think will stick with us for a long, long time. Just, after that last sip, you can't wait for the next bottle.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy that everybody in the comments seems excited about this Panoply Blanc because I am super excited about it. So, and it's important for us that every wine that we make have a reason to exist and have its own personality. We don't want the Esprit Blanc to be a lesser version of the Panoply Blanc, nor do we want to just try to make Esprit Blanc but better into the Panoply Blanc. We want it to have its own idea. So leaning heavier into Roussanne, having it be a little deeper, having it be that kind of softer, super luscious profile, and then having the Esprit Blanc be a little brighter, still have that core Roussanne weight, but have it be more about that brightness, a little more tropicality. I think is going to be really fun, and I can't wait to share that with everybody in the fall.
Yeah, I think, with the Panoply Blanc, that is certainly going to be one of those special occasion wines because where I think the structure that really holds up the Esprit Blanc is the acidity. And I think the structure that holds up the Panoply Blanc is like a spiciness that we have and kind of that baking spice character. So, they both have very different personalities and very different reasons for being.
Cool. Okay, a couple questions that we should answer. So Brian asked about Claret Blanche varietal bottle this year. So there was no Claret Blanche varietal bottling from 2024. I think there is a very good chance that we will have one from 2025. We got a new Claret block into production in 2025. We had something like 3 times the harvest of Claret in 25 that we had in 24. So I have high hopes. We have not done the blending yet, so I can't promise for sure. Our rule is always that if Panoply or Esprit wants something, it gets it. So we'll see. But I think there's a very good chance that there will be Claret bottled from the 2025 vintage. And then Nancy asked a question about what the aging is on the Esprit. So I'm assuming that she meant aging in the cellar, though she might also mean how will this age in the future. So maybe Chelsea, do you want to talk about how it's made in the cellar, and then I'll take the second half of the question?
Yeah, so all the individual pieces, typically the individual component lots that we choose for the Esprit Blanc, those are usually the lots that have been barrel aged. We don't buy a lot of new oak for our cellar program, but the barrels that we do use typically go to the Syrah program for the reds and then Rousson for the white wines. Um, Rousson, because it is a little bit higher pH, it does tend to be a little bit more broad without as much like structure and acidity. It does handle that oak really, really well. And again, it helps to provide some of that structure and back end. So we do have a little new oak that we are able to play with in the Esprit. And because we do make a decent amount of Esprit Blanc, a couple barrels doesn't make it oaky. You're not going to pick up a ton of oak influence on this wine, but there is just a little whisper of, that sweet vanilla character lending itself to the wine. So we blend all of the components, and then typically once they're all blended, then we put them into our neutral oak foudre for aging. And so we have, the large wooden vessels that do allow that oxygen exchange without lending really any oak influence to the wines. And so it'll stay in those foudre, close to a year because the wines are harvested. So this was harvested in, fall of 2024, and then it doesn't get bottled until December the following year. So this went into bottle last December. So it does have a long, long time to sit together, all blended, as a whole entity. So all the different parts and pieces can kind of, meld together and kind of knock off that baby fat a little bit and just become much more mature. And instead of being piecey and compartmentalized, it is just a full experience.
Cool. And then in terms of how this will likely evolve over time, I mean, we will be doing a summer vertical tasting that we always pick a wine to do a vertical tasting of each summer. And the summer vertical tasting this year will be the Esprit Blanc. So if this is something that you are intrigued by, put that on your calendar. I have written down when that is. That's going to be July 12th. But that's a little teaser. So it will age beautifully. We have a vintage chart. I know I had asked Ian to have that ready kind of late in the program. I don't know if he can find it and pull it up, but we do a vintage chart on our website that, man, that's fast. That gives our assessment of how every bottle is drinking. So you can see the Esprit de Beaucastel / Tablas red at the top there. There is a white version also down. If you scroll down that, you can't scroll in this picture. It's just I'm sure this is just a screenshot. But if you look, we have our assessment as to how it's drinking, and it drinks great out to 20 years. It's not the same, and you're not doing it wrong if you wait, if you drink it before 20 years. But it gets deeper and more caramelly, kind of creme brulee and hazelnuts, and it's quite a fun thing to watch over time. Okay, so we have had one wine from 2024. We're going to have a red from 2024 next. So before we jump into the reds, perfect. Sorry, I meant to talk about this. So food pairings. So at the live in-person pickup party, Chef Jeff Scott did a shrimp ceviche for the pairing with the Esprit Blanc that was absolutely delicious because it was sort of a creamy ceviche. There was a coconutty aspect to it. There was a little sweet potato puree that picked up the richness of the Esprit Blanc really nicely. And then the brighter aspects played off of the more traditional kind of citrusy, tangy ceviche characteristics. So that was a really, really yummy match.
And is that recipe on the website?
I don't think we've gotten it from Jeff yet. We should ask him because I would love to put that up. I would like to make it again myself.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So in terms of 2024, we've talked about the whites. What about the reds? We're going to be tasting like one of the very first of our 2024 reds. What do you remember about the red blending from 24?
Well, I mean, the red blending, at the end of it, it was an insane amount of wines that we had crafted. The 2024 vintage, you know, we are coming into a situation where we do have a lot of wine available, which makes it so fun to blend because not only is there a lot of it, but it's been exceptional. I think we actually just finished a bottling run this week. So we've been bottling Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, and it was all 2024 reds. And it's been such a delight to kind of revisit this vintage. Getting things blended and getting things prepped for blending. The 2024 vintage, and you mentioned this earlier this week, where I think a lot of people were feeling like the 2023 is the vintage to keep an eye on. Like the 2023s are spectacular. They are just like, those are the ones that I'm definitely, pulling aside and putting in my cellar. The 2024s are not a vintage to stand in anybody's shadow. And I want to, these are definitely wines that are in it for the long haul. The 2024s have a ton of structure. Like, I think that's one of the hallmarks of this year, or this 2024 vintage. They're powerful, they're intense, they've got this inkiness to them, but it's all balanced by this gorgeous, luscious floral fruit. So everything is just dripping in this beautiful fruit, and then it just grabs you and holds onto your palate. Yeah, I'm a huge fan so far of the 2024s, and every single wine we bottled this week is just like, oh no, I think this is my favorite. No, actually, I think this is my favorite. Oh my gosh, well, this is probably my favorite. So it's been, yeah, it's an exciting vintage to watch out for, and I think this is only going to get better with time too, because it does have so much intensity behind it. This is going to be it's again beautiful now, fun to drink now. These are wines that will do very, very well laying down in a cellar.
Yeah, it was a year which started out cool and wet. We thought it was going to be a repeat of 2023. Because we were like, by the middle of June, it was tracking almost identically to 2023. And then it was like somebody flipped a switch. And the last week of June, it got hot, and it stayed hot until November. So it seemed like the grapevines were like, oh, wait, like, you want us to go faster? Like, we can go faster, because they had all of the reserves and all of the water reserves, all of the vine health, all of the soil health was in great shape because of the consecutive cool years and all of the water. And so we didn't get any of the kind of weirdness that we got in hot years like 2020 and 2022 that were also drought years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a great finish. Let's talk about the Côte de Table specifically. So the 2024 Côte, which is always led by Grenache, good chunk of Syrah, and then a decent chunk of both Counoise and Mourvèdre also. So Chelsea, can you talk a little bit about what you like about Grenache when it plays a lead role?
Grenache, it's interesting because we talk about grape varieties in the cellar like they're friends, because we do spend a lot of time with them, and you really get to know them on a different kind of level. But Grenache to me is always just the most joyful and jubilant of any of the varieties that we work with. As you can see from that picture there, it's a great snacking berry. So when you're, long days up on the sorting table, you consume a lot of Grenache. Big, juicy berries, but the skins, typically with a larger berry, you tend to have traditionally less structure and less tannin. And that's not the case with Grenache. Grenache does have a lot of structure, a lot of grip. But it is something that has this bounce. It has this chewiness. Grenache to me is always one of those great varieties where if we're blending something and it's not quite there, it's just missing a little bit of something, Grenache is more often than not the answer. This is going to be like, if you're missing a little mid palate, if you're missing a little structure on the back end, if you're missing a little florality, if you're missing a little fruitiness, Grenache is going to satisfy all of those requests and more. But it is one of those great varieties that always kind of reminds me of maybe the class clown in school, where always it's fun and maybe a bit distracted and distracting, but with time, this is something that really settles into itself so beautifully. And Grenache, with some age, it kind of, dusts off a little bit of that candied fruit character and deepens into itself really nicely. And then you're left with that beautiful fruit, the intense structure. And this is something that, starts off young, just excited. And then all of a sudden, with a little bit more time, it's magnificent. I'm a huge Grenache fan, but this is one of those great varieties. It's just like, it's so lovely to have this to work with, because it really also has just this huge array of different styles that you can make from it. Um, from light and floral and juicy all the way to like heavy and dense and structured. And one of the things that I always tell people about Grenache is, color is not an indicator of intensity. And, you always see that with Grenache, where it does have, a lighter color to it, at least on our estate. And then it just has these claws on your palate, and it just, doesn't want to let go. And it's such a fun experience to, watch somebody see that, how Grenache behaves, from the glass to the palate for the first time. But it's so fun to blend with.
And we have like all of those Grenaches in our lineup now. I mean, we've got everything from the richest, meatiest Grenaches that go into something like Panoply or Esprit, through the varietal Grenache, through the lots that become the lead in the Côte Tables, all the way to the Alouette, the chillable Grenache that we just sold out of the 24, but we're excited to have a bigger production of 25. So that's something that everybody can look forward to. We're going to do an early summer release on that.
Yeah.
Cool. So anything else on 2024, Chelsea, before we turn our attention back to 2023?
I think, 2024 was a great vintage for us. 2023, which we'll talk about later, that was a tough act to follow. But 2024 was a fun vintage to harvest. Everything came in. It was a little bit later, and we did have time to kind of really wrap our heads around what that vintage was going to look like. And it was kind of, we got everybody's feet under them, and we had this good rhythm. And then all of a sudden, harvest was off in earnest. But it's a fun pace to have for a harvest, to experience a harvest like that, where you have the whole team where it's able to click and able to get into that rhythm, and then it's go time. And the fruit that was coming in that vintage was just such a treat to work with. We did have, like I said, we had a lot of that structure. The 2024 vintage, the rosés that we were pulling, the Saugnes that we were pulling for Dianthus, I remember we were leaving them on the skins for about a day. The color was, getting intense pretty quickly, and the aromatics were developing quickly. So again, coming back to the Dianthus being that first snapshot of the vintage, all of a sudden, we knew that we had something really, really special in our hands. And I think it's proving to be correct.
Cool. Okay, we'll now turn the clock back a year to 2023. So there've been 2 intervening harvests since then. But one of the things that I really love about 23 is the texture that the tannins have. And these 3 wines that we're going to be tasting are all the kind of most tannically rich and most texturally complex of the wines that we make. They're the ones that we think benefit from extra time. They get long aging in the cellar, and then we bottle them and we age them for another year in bottle before we release them. And often that means that these are wines that are going to benefit from even more time in the cellar. I mean, often our Syrahs I'll taste when they're young, and they are like, you can tell the power and the potential that's there, but I'm burying them in the back of my wine fridge for a decade. 2023, because it was the coolest year that we've had in almost 15 years, because everything took so long to get ripe and it ripened so gradually, and then the harvest season was this kind of perfect, gentle harvest season where things ripen slowly and in sequence. there's a refinement to the tannins of these highly tannic grapes that I think is going to be something to look out for with all three of these wines that we're going to have next. So we're starting with the Syrah. But meanwhile, Chelsea, what do you remember about this 2023 harvest season?
2023, I will always come back to 2023 just being like truly the dream vintage. I think, as a winemaker, if you could custom design a growing season and a harvest season, I think anybody that you ask is going to say it's the 2023 vintage. It was, everything had extended hang time on the vine, so it was able to develop all of these. You know, the ripeness was just a slow development, which did, I think, in the end, add these layers of nuance and complexity that you don't typically get with a quick development. And it's really kind of the same idea as why we like to do nice, slow native yeast ferments, where, the longer it takes to get something through, the more layers, the more nuance, the more complexity you're going to get for the finished product. So with that extended hang time that all of the grapes experienced in 2023, everything that came into our cellar was just of exceptional quality. It was one of those years where everything that we harvested, we run wet chemistry really the day after, for reds at least, the day after everything's picked. And it was almost like a joke because every lot that we ran was just like hitting textbook numbers for every single lot. And it was just like, I don't really know what I'm here for. Like, my job is being done for me. It was not just the beauty of the fruit and the quality of the fruit that we experienced, but it was also the pacing of everything. Everything came in just metered and, it was very polite. The fruit just gave us plenty of time to, press off a tank, ferment it with plenty of time. The health of the vineyard was good, so the fermentations were easy and straightforward. And then we had plenty of time to ferment everything, press it off, empty the tank, and then the next lot would come in. And that's not the case with most vintages. And then the other thing is, too, we had a good amount of fruit from 2023. So
Yeah.
It was a lot of fruit, and it was all exceptional. That was, really, if you just have, these checklists of everything that you could ask for in a vintage, it really, didn't just check all the boxes, it colored all of them in.
Yeah, it was such a lovely vintage. We didn't finish harvesting until the 13th of November. Used to be a little more common that we would pick into November. We haven't done that since 2013. So the fact that not only did it go into November, it went 2 full weeks into November gives you a sense of what kind of an anomalous vintage it was. So
With the pumpkins at the bottom there.
yeah, pumpkins at the bottom. God, when you get almost to Thanksgiving, we didn't start the harvest until the 12th of September. That's late for us. I think. Compare that to what we're likely to see this year. We could be harvesting we could harvest before the end of July this year if things stay at the current pace. But
Yeah.
Starting in the middle of September is great. It's a little scary when you get to the middle of October and you're less than half picked. Because you could start to get some wet weather, but we didn't. We had this sort of glorious Indian summer at the end of the growing season, and we're able to bring stuff in good shape. So really, I think Chelsea nailed it by saying it's like the vintage that you would design if you were given the power to just say, I want the vintage to be like this. Okay, so that is probably a little hard to see. But if you see the dashed line, not quite at the bottom two lines. The bottom two lines are 2010 and 2011 that were extraordinarily cool. That dashed line that's just above those two bottom lines, that was 2023. And then all of the other vintages since then are above that. So that's a measure of heat accumulation. So you can see how gradual that heat accumulation was, which is great. Again, if you can design it, that's terrific. Is there Who edited this? 100% Syrah, 100% estate grown. Totally is 100% love. I think Syrah doesn't get enough credit for being a lover. It's so dark and it's kind of suave um, and in this vintage it's dark, but it's also kind of smooth and refined. Um, there's a question that we get, yeah, perfect, about the difference between the growing season and the wine for the estate Syrah versus the Shake Ridge Syrah. Chelsea, do you want to take that?
Yeah, super cool question. And we actually, the Shake Ridge Syrah 2024 was one of the wines that we bottled today, actually. But the Shake Ridge Syrah is, it's grown up in Amador County by Ann Kramer, who is very well known throughout the industry. She's kind of, a viticultural icon. But her property up there, she has a lot of, very different growing conditions than we have. Higher altitude. She has a lot of like really cool rose quartz in her vineyard. But it is a very different expression of Syrah than we have. The Shake Ridge Syrah that we've been producing, I do think has a little more of that like butterscotch and caramel depth to it already. It has this great saltiness, which ours always has a nice salinity too, but hers has kind of that like brown butter, like brown salted sweet cream butter character to it that just adds this cloak around it. I think ours has perhaps a little bit more high toned acidity, a little bit more vibrancy. Two very different expressions of Syrah that are both very legitimate expressions of the grape variety. But I think it totally depends on, how you're pairing that Syrah in a given scenario. Her Syrah is a real treat for us to work with, and we've been working with it for a couple of years now. But it does have a little bit more of that softness to it.
Yeah, it's great. There's a lot of iron in the soil up in the Sierra foothills, which there's not really here in Paso. And there is that characteristic, like brown butter kind of warmth characteristic. I get that in the Shake Ridge Syrah. I also get that in a lot of the Syrahs from the Rocks District up in northeastern Oregon. It's that the similar kind of red soils that you see. It's a cool terroir, and it's really fun for us to get a chance to play with both. And that's really the appeal for us of the Lignée de Tables program. It's we get to explore how the same vine material does in these other terroirs.
Well, and it's especially cool for me. I mean, the vineyards that we've been working with the last couple of years, I'm from the Sierra foothills. And so working with fruit that's coming from Amador and from El Dorado for the Fanati vineyard, this is like, it's just a real treat and kind of homecoming experience for me, working with fruit from where I'm from at my new home. It's really cool.
Awesome. Okay, a couple more comments on the Syrah that came through. That people are enjoying it. It's great. I'm very happy that people are enjoying it. It is a Syrah vintage that I really love because it's not just something that I think will be good in the long run. It's something that I think is in a beautiful place already right now. Richard asks a really interesting question. I'm not even gonna try to answer this. I'm gonna let you, Chelsea, tackle this one.
Richard, that is an excellent question. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, no matter what vintage we're given, and there is a lot of trust put into the process, and I'm talking about the entire process. So all the work that's gone on the whole year, the entire growing season by an exceptional team. I think we have a lot of benefits to where we are and the people that we work with, that everybody is so passionate and does put a lot into everything that they do, not just during harvest, but the entire year. So when it comes time to harvest, every single year it's a big deal. and one really difficult year. And I will tell you, 2022, I always say it made me kind of question a lot of my life choices, because that was an exceptionally difficult vintage. And then, Mother Nature gave us 2023, which kind of like, oh yes, this is what I love about this job. This is a great joy. Yeah, so every year you're handed something different, and that's one of the cool things about this career, is that they can be, and they are, vastly different. There's no such thing as a normal vintage. Every year has its positives, has its challenges, and you just have to know how to work with them. So
Yeah, it's great. One of the things that I often come back to when I'm thinking about a question like that is we are trying almost always in the cellar to make the wines, the best possible wines that we can make from that vintage. We're not trying to make a vintage taste like another year, or match up to some sort of ideal that we somehow have separate from what the year is. We're just trying to make it be the best that that year can give us. And we know by the time we get to the blending trials, or at least by the time we've done the first couple of days of the blending trials and we've graded the different lots, we have a rough sense of what the year is like overall, what the best lots are like, and what the percentages are of the best lots. And there are years where you only really have enough of the very top rated lots to make the amount of Esprit that you want to make. And sometimes it even constrains the amount of Esprit that we want to make. And then there are years like 2023 where we could have made twice as much Esprit as we needed to make and wanted to make, given the quality of the lots. And so like there weren't really a lot of bad choices we could make. And I come back to that. Like if you have amazing Syrah and amazing Grenache and amazing Mourvedre and really high quality trace varieties, like almost no matter how you put them together, they're going to be terrific. Like, so it's really just a question of what personality characteristics do we really want to highlight from this vintage, but not having to have it match up to this, like somehow like vintage abstract idea, I think makes it a lot easier to feel confident that we are actually hitting the mark every year.
Well, and that was one of the challenges, if I recall, of the 2023 red blending, where we typically make 3 different iterations of, say, Esprit, and then we taste them blind. We don't know which is heavier percentage of Syrah or Grenache or what have you. And everybody tastes them blind and then scores them their first choice, second choice, third choice. And the 2023 red blending was challenging because everybody liked different wines. And then you kind of had to advocate why you liked it so much, because it was just like a mishmash of scores where, in more challenging years, there are, sometimes some very clear winners. And so everybody kind of says, no, this is without a doubt the strongest of the wines. In a year like 2023, you really have to nail down how you want to express that vintage. And it was an advocation process. And I remember kind of explaining myself, like, this is why I choose blend number 2. And, it was a process for everybody to kind of meet in the middle. But it even in years where you do have exceptional fruit, there are different sets of challenges that come with that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's move to wine number 5. This is our 100% Tannat. Okay. So
I don't remember that 3%.
Yeah, the 3% Cabernet we remember. The 3% Craig Ham, I feel like he's probably more than 3% this wine, but
he is. Well, and I do think this is also worth talking about. We're talking about the changes in titles and the promotions. And I do think it's really, really important because it's outrageously exciting that Craig Ham, who has been working in the cellar for a very long time and has an insane amount of knowledge about this property and the cellar, he is now the winemaker at Topless Creek, which I did cry when I found out that was his new title, because it is extremely exciting. And I think, I've been working with Neil, I've been working with Craig, both for a long, long time. And this is, it feels very good right now.
Yeah, it's great. great. It's great. It's great. It's awfully nice to be able to promote two people who have a combined 35 years of experience in the cellar already into roles that where the titles are befitting of the levels of responsibility and the quality of the work that they've been doing. So, okay, so I should talk a little bit about Tanat because I am guessing that well, there are people who have been longtime Topless Creek fans who I'm sure are like, oh, of course, Topless Creek makes Tanat. That makes sense. Really, if you know that we are a Chateauneuf-du-Pape inspired winery, you could legitimately wonder what on earth we are doing with this grape, which has nothing to do with Chateauneuf-du-Pape. It's from an entirely different part of France. It's from southwestern France, not southeastern or south middle France. It is not related to any of the Rhone grape varieties. It is more closely related to grapes like Cabernet. And the reason that we have it is that there was a guy in France who decided that we should. And it was not the parents. When we worked out the grapes that we wanted to bring into the country, we had decided on 8 varieties, 4 reds, 4 whites, all from the Beaucastel estate. They turned this request over to the guy who ran, up until just a couple of years ago, the nursery that they had supplied with vines in Montpellier. 10 grape varieties showed up. The 8 that we had agreed on, and 2 extras. One of them was Vermentino, and the other was Tanat. And it took us months to untangle what had happened. We thought at first that the U.S. Department of Agriculture was billing us for somebody else's grapevines, and then when we were told that they had come with all of the other French vines and we needed to take it up with the French, my dad called the parents and said, "You didn't send us Tanat and Vermentino, did you?" And their response was, "Why would we have done that? We don't grow those grape varieties." So it took months for my dad to figure out what had happened and track it back to this guy, this nursery manager in Montpellier. And I guess when he talked to him, he was totally unapologetic, like no recognition that this was sort of a presumption. He said, "Yes, I know these grape varieties. I've been learning about Paso Robles. You should plant them. They'll do well for you." So, like, I think once my dad picked his jaw up off the floor and did a little bit of research into these grapes, he decided that, like, maybe this guy was right, that they should, at the very least, grow well in Paso Robles. And they are 2 of the easiest varieties in the vineyard in terms of how much work they are and the amount of productivity that you get, like as a ratio to the amount of work you have to do to baby them. And so we made a little bit every year, a little bit of both of them every year since 2002. So now we have become known as kind of the, I don't know, like kind of the godfathers of Tanat in California, which is like hilarious and ridiculous and fun. But yeah. So anyway, Tanat. There was a question about the little bit of Cabernet that's in here. So the Cabernet is another piece of the story here. We have 0 estate blocks of Cab. We have 2 rows of Cabernet in our nursery. And that was from an era when we'd brought our grapevines in. We had tried to make the nursery into a commercial venture. We'd never been all that successful doing it. The nursery business is super cyclical, where because there's a long lag time between somebody deciding to plant and then those grapes getting into production, it's like 5 years to between the beginning and the end. It tends to be that lots of people decide that the same thing needs to be planted, and then by the time that comes into production, there's too much of it. And so there's this boom and bust of most varieties. And so we would have years where we would do great in our nursery, then we'd have years where we would lose $100,000 trying to figure out what the right things were to graft. And so my dad had the idea that maybe the nursery business would be a better business if we had a few grape varieties that people always wanted. So we already had a little bit of Chardonnay from the Chardonnay experiment that we had done for Sonoma-Cutrer, but we thought we would bring in Cabernet and Merlot and Cabernet Franc to go along with it. And the Cab was the first of those to come through the quarantine. We made enough vines to plant a couple of rows of Cabernet, and then decided that we were going to outsource the nursery and not grow the grapevine, the grape varieties, and do the grafting here ourselves anyway. So we never planted the Merlot or the Cabernet Franc. We do still have a few of those mother vines in pots hidden deep around the property. scavenger hunt for the next time that people come here. But we realized that Cab is a historically important blending partner for Tannat. And it, yeah, this is it. So in Madiran, where Tannat is best known from in France, they add Cabernet because it helps mellow out the Tannat. And I just love the fact that there is a grape which is so intense that you use Cab to mellow it out. So most years we will use all of the Cabernet that we have, and it comes out to 2 or 3 or 4% of our Tannat blend. We have bottled Cab 4 times in our history where we got to the blending table and tasted the 2 barrels of Cab that we made and couldn't bear to blend it away. The most recent was 2017, 2018, something like that.
I don't remember the last time we did.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, but there are years where we say absolutely not. We need to show this on its own, even if it is the most we've had is 4 barrels. And that was a bountiful year. I think that was 2010. Yeah, but the Cabernet that we make here it's really fun, and it is, extremely varietally correct. But in so many years, it's so little production. And it is really fun for us to play with, but for the most part, it's just a neat little oddity that we know is going to go into Tannat.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath for a Cab coming out.
And definitely not a Chardonnay because they're all gone.
No, we grafted those over to Mourvedre and Counoise, so no Chard. But Paso Robles is a great place to grow Cabernet. I don't think there's a lot of doubt about that. It's just not who we are. So we sort of set certain boundaries for ourselves. We break those boundaries from time to time. Witness the Tannat, but it's we try to limit those side quests to just 1 or 2 a year and not get too distracted by them.
So. Absolutely. Well, and then Tannat is fun too because it does allow us, to break up, to kind of shake up the blend, if you will, of the Engoblé. Because the Engoblé, is, more traditional Rhone varieties. And then we do add usually anywhere from 3 to 9% ish Tannat to that blend every year, just to kind of hold it on your palate for a little bit longer. But it also just makes a really, really fun blend. Just, not a lot, but it doesn't take a lot of Tannat to really change the landscape of a wine.
Yeah. So describe Tannat, Chelsea. How do you describe it to people?
Boy, Tannat is a muscularly structured wine. It does have more of that like bulky muscle to it. But Tannat is also just an exploration, like a full exploration of the flavor and aroma wheel that you can look at, if you're learning about wine and kind of, compartmentalizing like, oh, is this wine more fruity or is it more earthy or is it more spicy or is it, where are you going on this flavor and aroma wheel? And I feel like Tannat, every time we do tasting notes for it, it's like if you were just to spin that wheel and it's just all of those things. I feel like we're always laughing because it has that like irony, bloody character, and it has this roasted game, and it has, this powerful intensity, and it has that gunmetal and flint, and it also has violets, and it also has candy, and it also, it has, these really powerful, intense pieces, and that's kind of the structure. And then it has all these like beautiful, delicate things that just kind of like fit themselves into the nooks and crannies of this wine. So this is like, you could literally say anything about this wine, and it's probably in there.
I love that you mentioned the violets, that kind of floral top note that Tannat always has for me above all of this like dense, powerful, tannic, rich, dark, just lushness. And it was funny. I told that to somebody recently. It was like, oh, it has these violets to it, and people heard violence, and I was like, yeah, it's got that too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. Again, if you think that it could be in there, it's probably in there.
Okay, what do you like to pair with Tannat in terms of food?
Oh, Again, coming back to the fact that I love to ski, I love to be up in the snow, I love to be in the cold. Um, I'm a winter person at heart. This is one of my favorite wines to turn to. And one of my favorite things to make in the winter is the Thomas Keller slow cooker cassoulet. And this is just always an excellent pairing with that. You have, the buttery character from the beans, you have the saltiness of the bacon, and then you also have like that fatty
I
oiliness.
think Chelsea, we have a little bit of a connection issue, I think, with Chelsea.
Oh.
I don't know, Chelsea, if you can hear us, but we lost you for most of that answer of the food pairing side of things.
Am I back now?
Sounds like maybe it's not 100% back. Maybe Ian, while Chelsea's internet recovers, can you put up the food pairing that Chef Jeff did for the in-person pickup party? So it was a spring lamb navarone. So it's basically a lamb stew with carrots and leeks and the star anise, that kind of deep, juicy lushness. Spiciness, spicy richness, pretty great. Richard just popped up, so maybe it was not on Chelsea's internet side. Maybe it was the Topless Creek internet side. That actually makes a lot of sense.
All right, so should I keep going then?
Yes, please. Okay. Well, actually, everybody already heard you, so just I would just be the one who'd be surprised by it. So no, you don't need to repeat
wonderful.
yourself. Right. Ian just appeared outside the window of the office that I'm doing this in and said, no, that was us. That was us. So, okay. Sorry, everybody. If you lost me for a little bit and heard Chelsea perfectly, well, great. That's probably way better anyway.
Good.
Okay. So I think we are ready for wine number 6. We're ready we've made our way all the way to the Panoply. Which that is a reward in and of itself. So Panoply is the wine that we make in the honor of the Beaucastel Hommage à Jacques Perrin, which is one of the greatest Chateauneuf du Papes in the world. It's made with a very high percentage of Mourvèdre to honor Jacques Perrin, who was the patriarch of the Perrin family and the one who really established Mourvèdre as the lead grape at Beaucastel. So do we have a picture of the literal meaning of panoply? Because it's fun. Great. Yeah. So a panoply was essentially a knight's full regalia, like not just when he's got a shield and a breastplate or a chainmail. It's like the whole getup when you've got the helmet and the arm things and the leg things, and I don't have all of that vocabulary, but probably should have studied it.
I think that is what it's called, actually.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. But the panoply, so a knight in his panoply would have been a knight turned out for a tournament, for show. And one of the things that my dad really loved was words that had the same meaning in French and in English, particularly if they had the same double meanings. And panoply has turned into, it's not that it's a common word, but it is used still in the sort of the same way that a word like cornucopia is used, where it's like the full array of all of the stuff all together. And that was the spirit that we wanted to share when we made Panoply for the first time back in 2000. So in the same way kind of you did for the Esprit Blanc, can you talk a little bit about what makes a lot Panoply worthy in your mind, Chelsea?
Yeah, the Panoply is so fun to make because, like you mentioned, we're not trying to make anything better than Esprit. It's just a different expression of this wine. And I think it's also important to note that this is a wine that we still want to fit seamlessly within the array of wines that Topless Creek produces. So we're not making something that is, really heavily oaked or, overly powerful or dense or ripe or any of those things. It still needs to be a Topless Creek wine at heart. But essentially, what we're doing with Panoply is when we're going around the blending table and people are talking about lots, there are certain lots where you just see people's cheeks flush and their eyes light up, and they are just so excited about what's in the glass in front of them. And those are usually the ones that will star. And even even beyond that, sometimes we'll just do a barrel selection. So with these lots that are exceptional, we'll taste through, say there's that singular lot is comprised of 12 barrels. We'll taste all 12 of those barrels and pick two of them that we think are of the highest quality. And that's the fun thing about wine is even though it's the same lot, all of these wines are living entities and they are evolving as a living being. And so you do have them split into these different vessels. And despite the fact that it might be the same barrel cooper, you have a completely different wine from barrel one to barrel two, and definitely, between lots. So we go through and do a barrel selection of the ones that we think just have just the most elegance, the most ethereal personality. They have this, they make you want to float, but they also are so grounded. And I think even just, putting my nose in this glass after pouring it, just like, I'm so excited about this wine. I mean, this wine to me is always just an exclamation point on an evening. The wines that we make, we're so honored to make something that people enjoy for special occasions. And this one in particular, I think is something that this wine can make the occasion special. Even if it was just kind of a casual night together, this is something where you open it and you go, oh wow. Yeah. So this is again, it needs to be Talbot's Creek, but it needs to be just a little bit more.
I love that. Yeah, it was. I think it's maybe a little surprising for people sometimes to understand why we love Mourvedre so much. It's not a grape which is that widely planted in California. There's not even all that much of it in France. There used to be a lot, but it turned out to be difficult to graft. So it was largely replaced by other things, mostly Grenache, in the aftermath of phylloxera when people needed to replant with grafted vines. But for us, it's got everything that we want. It's got lushness, it's got fruit, it's got non-fruit elements. It's got this beautiful, like leathery, loamy, earthy, chocolatey character. It's got lots of tannin, but the tannins aren't hard. The tannins are kind of chewy and inviting. And particularly in a year like 2023, where like I think this wine is so intense in flavor, but there's no sense of real weight to it. It's light on its feet. Um, it's got texture, it's got richness, but there's no heaviness. I don't know. I love it. I was super excited, given that it's not the biggest and the most like bruising of the wines. I was super excited that it got the highest score of any of the wines in the Paso Robles report that the Robert Parker Wine Advocate came out with late last year, and like that's awfully cool. And it's fun to know that was amidst all of the competition of all of these wines that might be 2% higher in alcohol than this one is. That this one got highlighted as kind of like the best that the region can do, which was so exciting for us.
It is so exciting. Well, and you can even see it here too, because the preceding wines, the Syrah and the Tannat, are structurally so big, and they do have a lot of fruit to them. And this wine just, this does perfectly well after those, like you said, big bruising wines.
Cool. Okay, a couple of comments of the panoply. I saw Ian already put a few of them up. Yeah, I mean, there was depth and complexity, absolutely. I do think that this is a wine that will go 20, 25, 30 years easily. But I also, a little bit like I said with the Syrah, I do not think that you're doing it wrong if you open one of these wines in the next few years. It is so good right now that, like, I don't think you need to I don't think you need to age it in order to have it be at its best. I think it's going to be great for a long time. And if you are interested in how these wines age, we did a vertical tasting of the Panoply a few years back. I think it was 2009. We did it for the public in sort of celebration of our 30th anniversary. So we'll do it again. Maybe it's our 40th anniversary. We'll do it again.
I
But
can't wait.
yeah, seriously, the date, we'll do it. But if you are interested, there is a blog where I wrote that up. I don't know, Ian, maybe you could stick the link to that Panoply vertical tasting blog in the chat for people. So it's so they have it if they want to know how this is going to age over time. And obviously, the vintage chart is our assessment of how everything is drinking right now. So it's not a prediction of what it's going to be. It's an assessment of where it is now. Cool. Okay, there looks like there's a couple more questions that have come in. So Richard asking about the decision to use more Syrah than Grenache in this blend is a really interesting one, and that's one of the ones that I don't think that I would have predicted. You don't know when you're doing your blind tastings which blend is going to end up being the one that you like the best. It was not a decision to use more Syrah than Grenache. It was, we tried one with more Syrah than Grenache, we tried one with more Grenache than Syrah, and we tried one where we put them both kind of equal, but raised the amount of Mourvedre. And our favorite, pretty universally, was the one where we leaned heavier into that Syrah. I don't know why that is. I agree that Grenache in 23 was incredible, but I think sometimes you don't know the way. It's sort of alchemy, the way that different things come together. I don't know. How would you answer that, Chelsea?
I mean, well, the Grenache in 2023 was magnificent, but so was everything else. So, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game with vintages like that. Just because the Grenache was so good doesn't mean that the Mourvedre and the Syrah were weaker. It was just one of those vintages where everything we had was of exceptional quality. Yeah, and that was that vintage that we were talking about, where there are certain challenges where you do have so many good pieces and parts at your disposal and at your discretion. And that was just the way it shook out that year. And that's why we taste things the way we do, and why we have so many varied personalities with varied backgrounds and experiences at the blending table. Because I do think, for all the sometimes maybe loving argument, and sometimes strife, because everybody has, the wine that they like the best, and that's clearly the best one. In the end, we do talk it out until we all agree that, this is the direction that we need to go. And I think that's a process that it really works for us.
For sure. Okay, Nancy asked if we've ever done a Tannat without cab. Yes, we have. In the years where we decided to bottle a cab, the Tannat was without Cabernet. I don't know. Chelsea, do you feel like you can taste a difference in the Tannats that have no cab versus the ones that have 3% cab?
I don't think. I think if I was really put to the test, I don't think I would be able to. But
that's not me. That's not me throwing shade. I don't think I would. So
yeah, but I do think there is, like we love to blend our wines. Even I always say, even our single varietal wines are blends of different picks and different lots, to make sure that we're really exploring the entire property here at Talbot's Creek. And making sure that we are able to build, a varietally correct expression of what we want to showcase. Yeah, so I think blending, it is going to add more complexity and just a little bit more depth. So I think it benefits from it. But whether or not I could tell you just by blind tasting which vintages, I don't think I'm that good.
Cool. And then a couple of other just nice comments. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, Chris. And I told Chris, I totally agree. My dad used to say the same thing. He used to say that he thought that the idea that a wine that was out of balance would become balanced with time was usually a fiction. It just didn't work that way. So, Yep, agreed.
We We try not to replace our foodras because it was very difficult to get them in place. That's not an easy task to get them to move. So we really try to take care of our things. And really, one of the things that we do to make sure that they last forever is to keep them hydrated. So the most important thing is to keep them full if we can. And if we're not able to keep them full, or if you're just between seasons, so after we empty it for bottling and before harvest hits, we'll just make sure to keep them steamed frequently to make sure that any microbial activity is kept knocked down, and then it also helps to hydrate the wood. But that's just to make sure that we have our beloved foodras forever and ever.
I mean, we have literally never gotten rid of a foodra, so we don't replace them. We have had to repair them a couple of times. We repair them in place. So yeah, I mean, they figure at Beaucastel that 50 years is sort of the minimum life that they would like to get out of a foodra. So we're not there yet. Our oldest one we bought in 1990 for the 96 vintage. So we probably bought that in 97. So it's getting close to 40 years old.
Yeah, but they're excellent. And the concrete eggs, well, knock on wood, but so far we haven't had any issues with those. They are a little more difficult to take care of because you need to make sure that you're not, expanding and contracting the material. So making sure that you're not heating it up and cooling it down too quickly. But other than that, yeah, they're pretty easy to take care of once you know the protocol.
I just realized I did my math wrong. 30 years old. The oldest foodra is 30 years old, not 40 years old. I lost a decade. Cool. Okay, so I do want to highlight a few things about what is coming up next at Topless Creek. So we do have a bunch of cool events coming that we already have scheduled. These are all already on the website. They're all already things that people can sign up for. So we tried to be a lot better. Thank you, Ian, for pushing this on us to try to get our full schedule up and posted at the beginning of the year. So these are already things, these are all up on the website. So we have that summer vertical tasting of the Esprit Blanc, which I am super excited about on July 12th. Before that, just in a few weeks, we've got our blending seminar. We're going to be doing the blending seminar on April 26th. People demanding Bjorn. That's funny. We'll have him he'll be in the closing credits. He's too big to put inside. He doesn't fit inside houses. And then we're going to be doing our lamb roast again on the 1st of August. So if you had the chance to come to that last year, it is just such a lovely event. We don't do a lot of dinners out here just because we're a long way outside of town, and I'm leery about giving people a great meal and great wine and then sending them on winding dark roads from a place where you can't get an Uber pickup. But like we try to pull out all the stops in the middle of the summer and do something that's really great. And so that's the lamb roast. So that'll be on August 1st. So you can already register for those, but keep an eye on your emails. We'll be sending out more details. We are also getting out on the road more. So this is our tour poster that Ian put together. It's just a handful of the places that we're going. We have new places that we've added since this was published. So we're going to be going to Houston and Austin, Santa Barbara, Half Moon Bay, Los Angeles, Boston, Nantucket, Willamette Valley, Walla Walla, Colorado, Santa Fe, Los Gatos, and San Francisco. All are already scheduled between now and the fall. There'll be more things that we're going to be adding. We will send out a note to you if you are within like 20 or 30 miles of where we're doing an event. So keep an eye on those. But if you'd like the full listing, it is up on our website now. More immediately, I'm hoping that there are a few of you who are on tonight who are going to be coming on the Rhone River Cruise that Chelsea and I will be hosting. That will be the first week of May. If you are not already registered, I'm sorry, it is sold out, but we'll do it again in a couple of years. But we will be sure to share pictures. It should be so much fun. We are also continuing to do on-demand and virtual events, not just virtual tastings, but we've had some really fun Instagram lives recently. Had John Albin, amazing pioneer of the Rhone movement, Elaine Chacon Brown, one of my favorite writers, We have a couple of guests already booked going forwards. So that's Michelle Bouffard, who is the founder of the Tasting Climate Change Conference and one of the most influential somms in Canada. She's based in Montreal, so she's going to be my next guest. I wanted to remind everybody about the Wine Atlas Collective, which we helped co-found last year, which is a group of 8 of like-minded wineries that you get reciprocal benefits at if you are a wine club member at Tablas Creek. So that includes places like Ridge and Frog's Leap here in California. It includes places further afield like Redtail Ridge up in the Finger Lakes of New York, and Brooks up in Oregon, Lake Hole 41 in Washington, William Chris in Texas, and Blenheim Vineyards in Virginia. So obviously, if you go to those places, please stop by those wineries. You'll be treated as a member because of your membership at Tablas Creek. But also, if you are interested, we are going to be doing a virtual tasting with the other 7 Wine Atlas Collective members, again, using Master of the World. So using the same technology that got you the tasting kits from Tablas Creek. That is going to be on the 15th of April. And there are still tickets, like kits available for that. So Ian, maybe you can post a link to that in the chat as well, because those that we did one in the fall, it was super fun, and the tickets sold out. The kits sold out really early.
I think I might have to buy one of those kits because that is a really cool lineup there.
Pretty fun lineup. Spring releases, so it's new stuff from everybody. Okay, that was a lot of me. Chelsea, what are you looking forward to in your world?
Well, we just wrapped that great bottling. I'm looking forward to releasing those to all of you guys and seeing what your thoughts are. And hopefully you feel as passionately about the quality of these wines as we have been. We've got some really cool stuff coming up. The blending, we've got the Perrins coming to help us with blending, which is always just an enormous treat. It's always so stressful when they come because you're presenting all of your hard work for the entire year. And then when they're leaving, we're just like, no, please don't go. This has been such great fun. But really kind of doing a deep dive into, the reds and the whites from the 2025 vintage and sitting down and seeing all of the hard work that we put into it. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the cruise. There's a great many things, and that's just in the next couple of weeks. But we've got eyes on the prize too. The flowering going on in the vineyard. It's the fresh beginning and the beginning of the next cycle. So there's a lot to be excited and grateful for right now.
Awesome. You looking forward to a July start to harvest?
Well, I mean, if it's a July start, chances are it'll be an early finish too. So
awesome. Cool. So everybody who joined, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on a Friday evening. We're grateful for your support, your interest, the great questions and comments. Like, I think this is maybe the best, most interactive, most comments that we've gotten in any of these. So thank you. Thank you everybody who tossed in some thoughts.
Yeah.
Chelsea, any final words?
I think, my final words are really, I feel very lucky to be part, not just of Tablas Creek, but everything that surrounds it. So, the interaction that we're seeing on this online forum, which is hard to have the interaction, but it's the people that make Tablas Creek. And I'm not just talking about the people that I get to work with, but the wine club members that I get to see, when they come out to the tasting room or when we go on the cruise, the relationships that we build. I've been here for a long time, so I have gotten to know a lot of you either in person or, virtually. And it's a really special community that you have all helped us to foster and create. And it's a huge honor. So thank you.
Amazing. I don't have anything really more to add. I don't think I can be any more eloquent than that. So, so on behalf of Chelsea, on behalf of Neil, Ian behind the controls, all the rest of us at Tablas Creek, thank you. We're grateful to have you as a part of the Tablas Creek family, and it would not be a family without you. So cheers. Happy spring, everybody.
Happy spring.
Atlantic. And before you did go, oh, I promised you that I'd hold you and beg you not to do so. But I let you go. Set your sails up and prayed the winds to blow. I like to pretend that I'm a merciful siren. Look out for the rock that I'm singing upon. Well, I'll mend your ship the very